We're going to dive more into the markets now with Bloomberg's Jess Menton. You know, it's really interesting. You're coming off of a tough month of October. You're walking into a bid into September. You have to ask if this bid is a strong one, given it was off the heels of tough jobs numbers. What are you seeing out there?
So it was tough, but actually at a certain point up until yesterday, though, obviously with yesterday's declines, but in October, usually it's known as the most volatile month compared to the other 11 months if you go back through history, but actually bucked that trend this past month, kind of like what we would have seen in September, usually the worst month, but the S&P 500 was higher about 2%. But actually yesterday, the S&P 500 snapped its longest streak of comp since 2021. So it actually went 29 sessions without a decline of more than 1%, which obviously that ended up happening yesterday, but obviously we're going into a pivotal week next week with the election, Fed decision, earnings obviously continuing, and then we do have a looming 13F deadline coming up too. But when you look overall for earnings, when you actually exclude energy companies, S&P 500 earnings growth actually double digits. It's around 10%. So those pre-estimates for earnings season were about 4%. If you look overall, it's around 7%. But it's really because of more of the commodities-related type companies. Obviously, we had Exxon and Chevron report earlier today, but really a lot of that drag is due to energy.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. Of course, we'll be speaking to the Exxon CEO, Mike Wirth, or Chevron rather, in just a couple minutes. We also had Exxon this morning. We have Halliburton next week. I mean, talk to us a little bit more about what's going on in that sector that's actually dragging down the index.
Well, in particular, because of the third quarter, how if you look at WTI or Brent prices, obviously they were down about double digits. So that was what was weighing on that. It's interesting, though, because if you look overall, it's close to about 30% contraction if you look for the energy sector overall for the third quarter year-over-year basis. But obviously, a lot of that is tied to commodity type prices. Also, materials is another sector that is expected to underperform. But of course, overall, if you look at growth, it's supposed to still be driven by tech, communication services. But specifically, when you're looking at that next week, as you mentioned, we will have Halliburton. We just had Schlumberger report a couple of weeks ago, obviously the world's largest oil field service provider. But earlier this summer, they both saw strong demand. But from Schlumberger, they did indicate that when it came to spending, we're seeing a slowdown in that. So that's going to be key to look at Halliburton next week, even though we did get a little bit of bright spots today from Chevron and Exxon.
Yeah, which is interesting, of course, because you think about the big oil majors, Exxon, Chevron, oil prices have just been going down and down. Jess Menton, got to leave it there. Really appreciate you.